Are you ready for the top 12?
I was sort of getting over the responsibility of having to manage a team.
The deeper you go, the more you can own your niche.
So I would say number one rule, go with your gut.
Let's get started with top 3 books or podcasts that you recommend.
My top 2 are definitely 2 African-American culture writers in the US that I have to, it's how I connect back with my home culture. One's a New York Times one called Still Processing, absolutely my favorite. And The Nod is second. And then just here in Australia, I love Chat 10 Looks 3. I'm early 40s, so I love Annabelle Clive and Lee Sales. Can't help it.
So The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is phenomenal. If you have not read that book, go and do it. It will help you with basically every area of your life, but mostly with the way that you relate to the world, which I think you cannot be successful in business if you don't understand your place in the world and how you feel and your personal development. That's number 1. Mm-hmm. And then my second 2 would also be 2 by the same author. You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero is a phenomenal book. It is much more woo-woo than I thought that I would enjoy, in terms of it's definitely about manifestation and thinking about your position in the universe and why you are where you are. And it's just not something that I ever thought that I would relate to. I tend to be quite practical and quite
down to earth. Yeah, I get that.
I really enjoyed that book. I really, really enjoyed it. And then her follow-up book to that was You Are a Badass at Making Money. And that was essentially the same kind of thing, but around manifesting money. Mm-hmm. And I kid you not, with the month that I read that book, I nearly doubled or half increased on the math.
Yeah,
but
increased by 50%.
Increased by 50% my income. And that has been a pattern that has stayed since April, since I read that book. So
love it. So
that's significantly helpful.
Yeah. So are you saying that if someone was to invest in you, that they'd see 50% growth month on month? Is that where you're at the moment?
Oh, look, yeah, sure. I am really, side note, with my coaching, I'm trying to be really practical about where to in business. So, I'm not just about giving handy hints and tips. One of the things that we do spend a lot of time on is looking at revenue and going, okay, well, if you did this, this, and this, you could increase this revenue, you could double that product output, you could, do X, Y, Z. And that was one of the things that this book really helped me with. So highly recommend it.
The top 3 books, limiting somebody that likes to read to only 3 books or something like that is actually quite cruel. But so, you talk about 100 books of different ones. But I've always sort of gone through trying to read a novel and then read a non-fiction book, read a textbook or even a chemistry textbook. And it makes you realise that, God, I wish I'd read this more when I was actually doing chemistry at school, because this is actually really quite interesting. Mm-hmm. So I guess sending that message there is mix up your reading between fiction and non-fiction. And to anybody that's out there that's still at school or something like that, make the most of it now and really read that textbook, because you'll realise it might not be too useful now, but it can help you in so many avenues down the track. For example, when I was working at Speedo, if I'd actually been able to talk about, hydrocarbons and plastics when I was talking about the fabrics they used to make swimwear, you would have actually been able to make a much better contribution and understood half the people in the room at a chemistry conference.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of stuff. But the books, top 3 books are all the things that I'm interested in at the moment. There's a book called Tuesdays with Maury. That's written by a fellow called Mitch Albom. He was a university student and he's a sociology professor who he really loves his classes, does all his classes, catches up with him 20 years or 30 years later when Maury's actually dying from, it's not motor neurone, but something very similar to motor neurone. He's losing his ability to move. And it's about Mitch, who's a famous sports writer, chasing the dollar. And when the company he's working for all goes on strike, there's a journalist strike, it frees up the opportunity for him to fly from Chicago to Detroit every Tuesday to have Tuesday afternoons with Maury and listen to Maury, the sociology professor, talk to him about what's important in life and what's not. And there's a lot more to life than just chasing that dollar and getting material possessions. It's, it's family and giving. And Maury actually gives some pretty good advice to Mitch, and they talk about it being Mitch's final thesis.
Right.
What's really important in life at the end of the day, what you can take with you and what you can leave behind.
Yeah.
Another book I've always liked. In a previous life, I used to fly commercially a lot. I wasn't a pilot, I was a passenger. But I used to love 747s, and there's a book called Wide Body by a called Clive Irving. And it's an interesting one at the moment when you see all the trouble they're having with the Boeing 737 Maxes, which got some pretty poor quality issues. The Wide Body really was about the history of commercial aviation. It was about the development of Pan Am placing the first order for Boeing, which really gave Boeing the encouragement, the big enough order to go ahead and build the 747. If they hadn't had that, that wouldn't have been built. But it was such a brilliant plane, even on day one, because of the engineering, and it had a quadruple redundancy in it. It wasn't one sensor, there were 4 sensors. And the pilots took it up on its first flight, and it's like, we don't need to do any more testing in this. We can, except for a couple of problems with some engines, we can pretty well take this across the Atlantic and show London how good it is.
Wow.
With that 737 Max, for example, there's only one sensor in that, and that's what caused those issues with the 2 accidents. So I think that sort of shows the quality of the engineering in the olden days, and now kind of the cutting corners. And if you look at the Boeing business model back then, it was build the product and we'll work out what it costs. And it's quite unfortunate in a way that so many commercial pressures from around the world these days are, we have to build the product to a certain price point, and to meet that we have to cut a lot of corners.
Yes, some business lessons there.
It's just been a transition in business in the last 40, 50 years of the countries that are rising and making stuff.
Yeah. So how about the third book?
A third book or a podcast
Yes.
is actually, it's called Warming Signs. Global warming is a huge issue, especially for the younger generation coming through, who I think must have real concerns about it. There's a very good podcast called Warming Signs. It's a girl called Kate, a young woman called Kate Parker in the US on the Weather Channel. 10, 15-minute podcasts where she will bring somebody in very experienced in their field who she will let talk and let speak about their field. Some podcasts, sometimes the person's speaking too much.
Yes.
She'll actually let them talk. There's one about, do we need to go to nuclear power? What are the issues there? 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima. What were the lessons we learned? Do we have to go versus coal? When do we have to go that tipping point from carbon in the atmosphere to the risk? Life's all about swapping one risk for the other, so that has to be made a decision. And the other one, somebody talking about if we have to bring women into farming and let them run the farms, the men probably still do the work, or make the men do the work, and smaller farming and more food production, and moving back to the circular economy where we just come back to smaller communities that don't travel as much.
Yeah, very interesting.
Warming Signs, Kate Parker.
Probably the first book I'd recommend would be Awaken, the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. I think that is a great starting point. The other book would be Principles by Ray Dalio. And I don't have a number 3 because I think 2 is enough. The reason being is because I'd say $1 Million Mentor for the third. Let's do that.
Well, we do love that Gary Vee. So the Gary Vee comes to my mind. I like Entrepreneurs on Fire. And for a little bit more of a feminine feel, I sometimes like to listen to, I'm having a brain fart. It's a money mindset course just about bringing in feminine energy and less hustle and less push and accepting like abundance into you. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of it right now, but I can't.
Okay, the top 3 books, I've got those ready. My top book is Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. This is probably the most important book you can ever read. And it was only a few years ago that I read it for the first time, talking about the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And you can just see little elements of yourself in this book, and it helps you to learn to make better decisions.
Mindset.
My second book is Mark Manson, What It Takes. It won't take you very long to read, but it's just a very hard look at
what you're doing, whether you have got what it takes, whether you're really prepared to put in the effort to grow your business or you're not. So I like that. And then my third one is actually a biography of James Packer called The Price of Fortune. And the reason I like this is because you can put as much effort and hard work into things as you like and grow things as much as you like. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have different personalities, different things matter to us, and sometimes things fail and sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes we have mental health problems, we have stress problems, and it doesn't matter whether you're a small business owner or you're a James Packer.
It still affects you the same way.
We're all on the same playing field.
Listening.
Okay, so unfortunately, I'm not much of a reader. My girlfriend would hate to hear me saying that. She's always trying to get me to read more, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts. Being that I work alone, often like in sheds, like by myself, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I churn through a lot of audio time. I should probably get into some audio books as well. But podcasts I found, 5-minute marketing is just something that I don't know. It's unparalleled. They're just short little snippets. They give you some great information on how to how to advertise yourself as a brand, and your skills. So I found they're really great. And then I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan. I listen to a lot of like stuff that's not directly related to business, but about how people work and their behavior and what they're more inclined to do. I listen to a lot of guests, but I find a lot of interest in the entrepreneurs that he gets on the show and he talks to. They're obviously mega successful. He's had guys like Elon Musk and mega
massive names
on the show. Massive names. But even the smaller guys or even the hard-working guys, he's had plenty of Marines on it, and just that fact of like, it is all in your mind, and if you can put your mind to something, that you reap the rewards. So
and there's a third one.
A third one, I don't know, I'd probably put it down to those two.